Hello, and welcome to Fresh Blood, a podcast about killing it after 40, where we prove that new blood does not necessarily equal young blood. Here to discuss what it takes to have continued success through life, I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. With over 20 years of executive recruiting experience, I've learned how much we can grow and be inspired by other people's stories. I'm excited to share that with you here on Fresh Blood. Today, we are speaking with Carolyn Regan. Carolyn is a leadership and organizational expert with a strength around building relationships with people at all levels. Carolyn builds employee engagement programs that lead to positive, award-winning work environments. She works with leaders to engage and develop people, strengthening their overall organization, and she helps create work environments that attract the engaged, inspired people who build great companies. Carolyn is currently the SVP of People with Racepoint Global, a leading communications agency, and I'm really excited to learn more about your story. Carolyn, thank you for joining us on Fresh Blood. Could you please tell us a bit more about your personal story and getting to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me on. As we've shared, we have had an excellent rapport, and I really just enjoy your energy, and it's so welcome to be here. My story, I came out of college as an accounting IT major.
Very different.
Absolutely. And what happened is I ended up going into a technology development program when I came out, and it was a 2-year work program. And halfway through, I realized that I liked what the consultants were doing with us around building teams and really kind of fast tracking us in the skills that we needed. And so somewhere after that, I really started to just talk to people within my company and outside my company about really the organizational development space, and realized that was truly my calling for work.
Especially recognizing that and going after it, seeing that that's something that appeals to you and starting to ask those questions and going after it. You know, not everyone does that. So what happened? How did you make the switch?
Yeah, so I actually was able to, the company that I worked for at the time was really large, and I was able to funnel my way through the consulting gig that I had at the time into working for the CIO in his HR group. And from there, I went on and got my master's in organizational development at Boston College. And from there, found my first full-time HR manager role. I managed learning and development in an agency, and I worked for the Weber Group.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big group. So was that your first PR experience then?
That was the first PR agency that I worked for. And at the time it was small. It was the Weber Group. And then eventually they merged with Shanwick to become Weber Shanwick.
And were you with them during that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a big thing. When the merge happens, there's a lot of culture shakeup. I'm super curious. How did you deal with that to bring it cohesively together?
Yeah, well, the first merger there was with Shanwick, which was Minnesota headquartered. And so the camaraderie between those two agencies were not dissimilar, where we were kind of a smaller agency and Larry still was at the helm at that point. And that merger was actually a really incredible learning experience to kind of see. They were much bigger, but we came in kind of overseeing, and I found an amazing mentor in that program to really talk about and learn from what to do, and from a culture shift and what worked, what didn't work. Then what happened a year later is Weber Shanwick merged with BSMG, which was New York headquartered, which is now the latest, the biggest Weber Shanwick. Yeah. And that was much more of a culture shakeup to go to BSMG, which was very New York City based, headquartered. And that was really an interesting learning experience. And so I would say that so much of where I am now, I look back on kind of what worked and what didn't work, and the lessons learned through those two different mergers of what worked really well and what didn't work really well, and took those lessons forward.
Oh, and I'm curious what worked really well because look, as a recruiter, I know that when there's mergers that happen, there's definitely there's definitely some turnover that happens. People get a little nervous, they get a little, they're not sure what's going to happen. And so there are people who jump. And I know that there is a lot of changes within companies and that you kind of have to make those shifts. So I find this interesting and I would love to know what you learned from it because where we are right now in the world with this whole great resignation and there's all of these other different shifts happening and people are leaving and there's a lot of organizations having to figure out how to fix their culture, if you will.
Right.
What did you learn during that time that really helped the most?
Yeah, I think what helped both with when I said we merged with Shamrock and found a mentor, and the same thing with BSMG is it's more aligning yourself with the people and finding like are there those key people that you admire, can learn from. Really, life is just about learning and growing and figuring out what helps you as an individual move forward. So with the BSMG merger, with the difference, there was who I think she actually still is the head of human resources and people there today is Abby Gold. And when we merged, she was actually second in command. And she was just someone that I really admired. I loved the way that she built relationships and was really strategic. And I just loved the way that she showed up. And so I think really with mergers and acquisitions is do you align with the people? Like kind of let everything else fall away and really look at yourself and how do you see yourself fitting into that new environment? And again, who can you learn and grow from? And really align from. But even, to fast forward today, it's really about who are you working with, who are you working for, and how do you align yourself with that leader? And is there respect when you're being truly honest with yourself?
I love that. I love that because I feel like I've spoken with a lot of people that are organizational experts, and it's like they start with the organizational aspect first and try to fit everyone into that, where it sounds to me like you're starting with the people first and making the organization work for the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's top to bottom, right? It's, if we fast forward to Racepoint Global today, we have a new president that came in April of 2020. And I look at the values that he represents and really lives by. And that's really become our culture. And then it's about how do we help create a new language for every employee and how do we help them really embrace the things that we're talking about, both when we're a little bit slower paced and when we're in this fast paced frenzy that can be an agency life. And so we really try to live those values but it's important to have them represented at the top. And then talk about how does that all translate and how does that work for every employee?
That's really big right now too. We've seen over the course of these past few years what it looks like when you don't have those values represented at the top. And I can tell you that as a recruiter talking to people, this is a big thing that they're looking for. It is they want to know that those values are being represented in their leaders. So that's a very big thing. And
absolutely.
And so I'm curious. So how did you go? So you were with Weber Shandwick. What happened between Weber Shandwick to Racepoint?
Yeah, I embarked on the biggest job of my life is becoming a mother. And so what happened is when I had my second child, I have three, I took a step back and stepped out of the kind of traditional work environment and consulted for a number of years. And that brought me to Racepoint, which started as Racepoint Group. But I came in just consulting and doing learning development because it was a lot of the people that I had worked with in the Weber Shandwick world. So Larry Weber, and came back and founded Racepoint Global. And I knew a lot of the senior leaders at that time. And it was an amazing environment to just really be able to help build the organization from a cultural standpoint, really support kind of the things that they were doing and building at that time.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious, what do you feel, because even though you took a break and took a step back in that middle, you still consulted, you've continuously moved up through the ranks in this industry and hold, one of the most senior positions you can as far as operations people go. So what do you feel has contributed to your success and your ability to continue to grow in this field?
Yeah, I think that some of the really kind of foundations of my success is just really focused on what works for me. And I think anyone's career path is not straightforward. It's
Yes.
really, I feel like there's these levers in life, and everyone talks about work life balance. And it's really about embracing work and your health and your relationships and your wellness all at the same time, right? So you have these different levels of like what's most important at
Hmm.
different phases in your life. And at that
Yeah.
point, I needed to kind of dial up my family
Yeah.
um, and work a little bit, but I still wanted to stay connected and involved. And so it's really about thinking what works for me and what works, what opportunities are out there, and where can I do the best work that I
Right.
have, and not really be afraid. We talk about fear, and I just
Mhm.
really think that that gets in the way so much of people making certain decisions.
Yes, it
And
does.
if in the coaching role, if I put that on, if you take that fear out of a decision that you have to make, what would you choose? How would you move if fear and failure were not on the table? What decisions would you make for your life? And I
Yeah.
think that's really been such a learning for me moving forward
Hmm.
in my role and growing. And really, the other side of it is, at Racepoint Global now, but we're employee centric. We're focused on the employee. And again, I look at our values of authenticity, belonging, compassion, and I think about that really it rings true to me as a person.
Hmm.
And so I just think it is a natural extension to try to figure out how do we create that environment for our employees and how do we make it work for them, regardless of whether they're with us for a year or build their whole career with us. How do we really help them grow and find their true self along the way?
Oh, I love that. And you're so right. Fear, I mean, fear is stops us from everything. And that question that you asked it's one of my favorites. It really helps you get to that core of what it is that what you want to be doing and what you're stopping yourself from doing too. That's,
Right.
we don't always realize what we're stopping ourselves from doing. So I love that.
Absolutely.
And I love that you're applying that to the people in your organization and helping them figure that out too. That's a gift. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
fantastic.
And I think the other thing that, COVID's been there's been such downside to that, but there's also been such gifting from the COVID experience, right? Is
Hmm.
how do we embrace flexibility? And I go back to those levers, right? At certain points we can embrace flexibility with work is like we're dialing up work because that's the most important thing to us. Or sometimes we need to dial that back and take care of ourselves and our
Yeah.
mental health and our physical well-being. And how do we dial that up? And I think that's with embracing flexibility as well,
Hmm.
is so important and something that we truly value at
Yeah.
Racepoint Global as well.
No, you're so right. The pandemic has been incredibly difficult, but there have been these glimmers, if you will, that have come through. And this is one of them. And it is something where I think we've all as a people have realized what it is that we don't want to put up with anymore. I mean,
Right?
we're like, I don't think I want to do that anymore. And it's not just it's everybody, and so
Yeah,
so the organizations and companies are having to react to this, and they're having to change and become more flexible and change their cultures in different ways. And I think this is a beautiful, wonderful thing that is needed across the board.
absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things, and just even that we had talked about before this was, what's a regret I have
Hmm.
in life. And one of them, it was interesting when I was reflecting on that was I regret when I was much younger, now that we're like in our over
Yeah.
40s, really, and I can go a little higher than that. I wish that when we were in our 20s, I went and lived in a different part of the country. I never really have lived outside of the Northeast. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a regret I have. And now I think of COVID and what that's done as far as the flexibility that we have with choosing where we live and
Right.
where we work. And with our embracement of flexibility, I feel like that's a whole benefit to our employees, including myself. So we have employees actually right now, like who have went home to different states, different time
Isn't that
zones to
amazing?
work in their family
Hmm.
environment for through the holidays. And it's not even a blank.
Yeah.
We're just like, yeah. I mean, we don't even have to really know. They don't. It's not really that's something that's discussed unless there's a time zone shift that they
Hmm.
need to talk about. And man, what a benefit of that. And I think of
Seriously.
myself in the coming years, like I can come to the West Coast and work there for a couple months if I want to,
Yeah, get a
or
vacation rental for a couple
yeah,
months. Yeah.
right. And so, what an amazing outcome, positive outcome
Really, it
from
just
that.
opens up the world for
It
so many
does.
people.
It
It's
does.
exciting.
Yeah.
It gets me all excited.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because, you've done a lot in your life. What do you feel has been, one or two of your greatest successes, and why, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of my greatest successes, honestly, is being able to build a career while parenting and
Right.
enjoying and really kind of being forefront in the idea of what is flexibility, what does a different type of work
Hmm.
look like for me, and not really having the fear to make that choice. So I think that was one. And I would say my second success is right now, like working with our senior leadership team and our community at Racepoint Global. We have an amazing, smart, kind, compassionate group of workers who work really hard. And we're starting to really see so much success for them individually as well as an agency. So
That's
that's been
awesome.
pretty incredible to help kind of, I would say this is like a new phase for Racepoint Global
Hmm.
that we're going after. And so I would say that this is one of them right now that I'm living,
That's
and I'm
awesome.
loving it.
And I love
Yeah.
that, it's not, you can hear that it's not only about because agencies are all about making the results for their clients, and that's the big message. And what I'm here is that, yeah, you guys are making the results for your clients, but you're also making sure that your employees are reaching their dreams and getting their hands on their goals too. And I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think in my role too, thankfully I have, an accounting IT background, which is
Hmm.
interesting, right? Just
Yeah.
but I think what we come to the table with is employee first for me, but withholding what's the right thing for our clients, what's the right thing for us financially as an agency. But really I come at it with the people perspective.
Yeah.
And, our head of finance comes at it like, okay, financially is my number one, but thankfully he really embraces an employee-centric environment,
Yeah.
and Bob really kind of sets the stage for those three perspectives.
This is the message that companies need. They really need to be employee first and employee side. That this is where everything is going. And as we know, it's the strong talent that creates strong companies. So you need to be
Yeah,
appealing to them. Yes. Now,
absolutely.
there's so much to learn from the flip side of that question. What about a time
Right.
of perceived failure, or just a monster obstacle, huge challenge, or a big mistake, something, that didn't quite go right, but you learned from it? Can you tell us about an
Yeah,
experience?
absolutely. There was an environment that I worked in for a while that was very toxic.
Hmm.
And I think that when I look back at what mistakes did I make, it was letting fear or just apprehension or accepting status quo as
Mm.
the norm. And um, man, like what would have happened if, we just had better conversations around what could change or where we all could find common ground. There's no place for toxicity in the workplace, right? We're
Yeah.
all showing up trying to do the best thing that we can do. And it's one of the things that we talk about Racepoint Global all the time. Like, are you coming at this with the best intent?
Hmm.
And that's where I think I do see that as a personal, yeah, I don't know if failure is too big a word, but definitely a point in time where I felt like I was much too passive
Hmm.
and sitting back and
Hmm.
letting that happen and being part of that environment.
Oh,
Um,
God,
yeah,
that's something I think can resonate with a lot of people. I mean, that gave me a little chill too. That just that being okay with the status quo, not questioning the status quo, not being
right?
brave enough to go ahead and push that to the next step to make it better.
Absolutely.
And that happens a lot. And yeah, we need to have that bravery
Yeah,
to push the envelope when we know something's not right.
absolutely.
And sometimes
Absolutely.
that takes a little experience and gravitas to get there, doesn't
It
it?
does. And I think when I think about your podcast and really looking at where we are, I think what a gift that I would love to be able to share with the much younger generation is
Yes.
that we have a saying, RPG, that there are no hard conversations.
Mm.
There's just conversations where
Hmm.
we can come at it with the best intent and talk through and, really come to some level playing field.
And really, how important just to apply that to life
Right.
everywhere, right?
Right.
Everywhere. If we could just
Absolutely.
all have those conversations, just
Yeah.
ask the hard question that's hard inside, but it's not hard once it's out there and you're able to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard when it's just sitting there and you're not able to deal with it.
Right.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I early before I came into Racepoint Global full time, which happened in the spring of 2020, I actually got my coaching certificate through IPEC, and really one thing that really applies to the way I think of life now is suspending judgment, myself as well as others. And so if we can get into these conversations and be emotional, right? If we think there's going to be a hard conversation, you get this emotion. And I've tried to notice that the emotion is just a red flag to say, okay, what are you feeling? Right? Like, what am I feeling myself? And who am I judging others? Am I judging myself? And how do I suspend that to really get at the crux of the conversation? And I think those are like really a habit that I've put in place is, what's my intent? Is it positive? Or am I being not so positive in this moment? How am I showing up? How do I suspend judgment of myself and others? And how do we just move forward and having a great conversation with the best intent possible?
Yes. It's that the quote, be curious, not judgmental. It's because exactly what you're saying there. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. And I try to remind myself of that quote when I go in with that little bit of judgmental, and this is in life everywhere, like even with my teenager,
absolutely.
I can ask a question in a judgmental way, or I can ask it in a curious way, and I'll get two completely different responses.
Right.
And life is always better when you go in with curiosity, is what I'm finding across the board.
And I feel like you've placed that in because we talk about our core behaviors of and curiosity leads the way.
Yes.
Right? How do we ask the right questions? How do we become curious about whether it's our client's industry or the problem that they're having or their new product? How do we get curious about influences? How do I get curious about employees and what do they need to be motivated and more engaged here? What's going on with them at this time? But, we talk about our core behaviors as being curiosity, growth mindset, and having a service-minded
so important
approach to everything. And if we put others first along with ourselves, again, that's like the best environment that we're building.
No, all of that makes me want to get up and cheer. I just, yes, to all of that.
Yeah, it's not perfect. I always say we're a work in progress, right? And these are the things that we aspire. When you talk about your questions to your child, I feel like the closer you are to someone, my husband, my children, I will kind of throw that attitude in there more. And it's like about how do you kind of come back at it with that curiosity question.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm. So now I'm curious because this podcast is a bit of a study of what is success to different people. What is that topic? What does that mean? And I'd love to know what your personal definition of success is, and based on that, what you believe is key to having continued success throughout life.
Yeah, I would say that it's changing. So, I think when I approached 51, sharing my age, only because I think it's, I'm proud of it. And I feel like when I started to get closer to 50, I started to think about, success differently. Right. And I actually read this quote not even too long ago, a couple months ago, that was like, up until your 40s, at some point, it's about the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it's about the service. Right. It's about what can you give and how do you participate. And so I do think success, I'm right in this weird in between where it's a flip of saying success to me is about building relationships and connections. And I think there's nothing more important to life than that. And I don't know if you've ever read the book Blue Zone, and it studies the 5 places in the world where we have the oldest people in existence, right? And so they boiled it down to there's 9. I think there's 9 criteria, but one of them is social interaction, right? And they were saying that the research shows that over the last 2 decades, people's personal connections have gone down. So where 15, 20 years ago, people would say they had 3 people in their lives, every person on average, that they could call at any time to have that. And now we're actually down to 1.
Oh, isn't that sad?
Right. And so when I think of success now, and if you asked me this 10 years ago, it would have been different.
It would have been different.
But if you ask me now, it's about connections and building relationships. And I think that's where, I bring it back to work, to Racepoint Global. And it's how do we build a community where people enjoy showing up and they really enjoy each other? And again, support. Whether they're with us for a short term or a really long term, how do we make sure that they're really making those connections to the people?
That's amazing. Well, because
Yeah,
that's health. I mean, that's mental health, which turns into physical health. And yes, I haven't read that book, but the Blue Zone. I've studied all the articles all around that. I'm fascinated
right.
with it. Yeah, and all of those, yes, all of those little pockets. They all have the octogenarians. They're all connected with each other. They're all
Yeah,
social. They have their like
right.
social group that they are fully active in. And
Absolutely.
we as humans, we need that. We
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's making me think I need to maybe step up my own game in some other areas.
Well, think about even you and I, right? We
Yeah.
met not too
Yeah.
long ago, and there's just a connection there. And I
Yeah.
feel like you've helped me grow in different ways, just thinking about what else can we do? How else should we approach our employee perspective? Or when we think of like, what do we offer as we recruit? And what do we
Hmm.
offer new employees? What kind of environment are we in? And what do I say? And is that authentic, right?
Yep.
We say
Right.
one of our core values is authenticity is like, are we? And
Hmm.
I think even some of the questions and conversations we've had, it's holding me accountable to who we want to be as
Hmm.
we are, in this
Oh, I love that you're
creation of
asking yourself
ourselves.
that question. Just that you're saying, are we? Yes.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, that's how
Yeah.
you got to ask yourself those questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I know. The other thing that we do is, we embrace transparency in so many different
Mhm.
ways. And again, nothing holds you more accountable than being transparent with data and having to
Mhm.
like repeat and reshare that information.
Mhm.
And so I think it's another way to show up authentically and build trust
Yeah.
too.
Mhm. Now, what about through all of this change? Is there any one piece of advice that you would give someone who is maybe looking for that right next opportunity, right? Because you're in this space. I mean, you do a lot of hiring. So,
Right.
you kind of know what works. So if someone is struggling to find their right next opportunity or even the right path or anything, is there a piece of advice that you would give them to help them?
Yeah. I think there's two things I think about from that. One, it goes back to my biggest thing is goes back to don't let fear or failure cloud your view, right?
Mhm.
If you took that out and really just write it down, what are you afraid of, right? And put that on one piece of paper and
Yeah.
like put it to the side. And then think about what decision would you make for if that wasn't part of it. So that's
Yeah.
one. But the other part of it is agency life, right? Like we find people who can do the job, but
Mhm.
are we the right place for you? Are we the right environment? And
Mhm.
that's the second half of it,
Mhm.
right? We want people who can be successful and feel like they can be part of this community and they want to be part of this community. Again, we embrace belonging.
Yeah.
And do they feel like we're a place? We're not going to be the best place for everyone. And
Yeah.
that's okay too, right? And so it's this two thing is this the type of work that you want to do? And is this the environment that you want to be in? Do you
Mm.
connect? It goes back to like my whole success criteria of relationships and connection. And is
Oh
this a
yeah.
place and it's the clients, right? As well as you spend
It's
as
a
much time
must.
with your clients. So are you going to feel connected to these clients? You're going to feel connected to this community, to the leaders, do your due diligence,
Yeah.
ask the right questions, ask
Ask
to
the
have
right questions.
conversations.
Mhm.
And so, just feel like you want to be part of that environment is really just so important.
What are the questions you like to hear as a hiring manager that make you just feel like, okay, this person knows, they get it. They know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And I know that hiring managers like people who know what they're looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do we look for? We look for the things that we talked about, right? We
Mhm.
want curiosity. We want people who want to learn, right? And I look for people who self advocate.
Mhm.
And it's through the questions that they ask.
Mhm.
And it might be around what kind of clients and whether it's the right response or not. Like, what kind of clients will I work on? What's my team look like? What kind of roles will I play? What do we
Mhm.
do that's not work related?
Mhm.
How do we stay connected, especially in this virtual world? Actually, someone that we have a recent hire that you helped bring in, and she just had so many great questions to talk about. How would she feel connected to this community being
Mm.
virtual?
That's a good
And
question.
how do we
Mhm.
make this, and what do we do about communication
Mhm.
and connection? And I just love that because that's so important to us.
Mhm.
And so, if this is a person who's looking for that, what great questions that she
Yeah.
asked.
Those are really good questions.
Yeah.
I always suggest people ask about the hiring manager's background too, just because it gives you insight as to, why did you choose to work there and why do you stay? It's like you can tell, you can always
Yeah.
feel, how
Yeah.
someone's feeling about the company, and that always gives good insight. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And really about like what energy did they bring into the conversation?
hmm
And what was their response to the people that they met from Racepoint Global as well? It's so important to kind of have that debrief.
Yes. Is there something that you find appeals to you in the interview process that's just good advice in general to people in the interview?
You know what? I think show up authentically, right? We
hmm
have conversations a lot that interviewing is a skill in and of itself, right?
Yes, it
And so
is.
I think there's people who can just interview their way into a position. But where's that get you?
100%.
Where's that get you in the long run, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're really truly looking for a place that you can connect with and be engaged and motivated to do your best work and really be a great stop on your career path, just show up authentically.
Yeah.
Bring the right energy and ask the right questions that really truly mean something to you, not what you think everyone else wants to hear. And I think that's something that we've tried to work with our interview team on our side to really feel out like, do they want these people on their team? Would they fight to have them on their clients?
That's a good
And that's the
question.
question I ask my interviewers.
hmm
I'm like, if you hire them and if they're like, oh, I don't know, it's just not, there's something that's not quite
Yeah.
there, something that's not quite right. But I just really, it's a short-term view if you're just interviewing to get the job
Yeah.
versus interviewing to find the place that's a good next step.
Right. And that right there is the key. And interviewers can feel that when you're just trying to interview just to get any kind of job. But when you're
Absolutely.
actually wanting to find something that's right for you and you're asking questions, they can feel that as well. And that's, those are the people that get the job.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What is something that you've learned throughout all of your experiences that you feel has brought you the most benefit to your life?
Yeah, good question. Gosh, the most benefit to my life. I think one, I'm a learner. Like I would
hmm
have continued on. If I could have afforded it, I would have continued my education even beyond
hmm
my master's. I just love to learn. And I think that's really what's been the best benefit. I feel like here I am, in my early 50s, still learning every day from, we look at RPG and our average age is mid to late 20s. Well, they teach me stuff every single day about
Yeah.
perspective and how smart they are and
hmm
what's a good environment to work in. And so I just think I'm learning from them. I'm learning from the team that I work with, who are my peers.
hmm
I just look to learn from every person that I interact with and every experience that I have. And
hmm
so I would say that's one, learning. And then the second thing is, we're right where we're supposed to be. So maybe to a fault, I believe that things happen for a reason and that we're on this path and that everything's going to teach us something, whether it's a positive experience or like, what do we take from that experience
Yeah.
along our journey? And I think that if we really, think about how do we embrace that and know that we're okay where we're at and that
Yeah.
we can choose every day on how we show up and what does this day look like for us. And so
I,
I really believe everything's happened to me along the way for
I
certain
completely
reasons.
agree. I completely agree. And when you look back, you can see those reasons, and it gives you that
Right.
insight. And being able to go through those experiences also helps you realize when you're going through tough times that it is a learning experience, which can help. I can think of times where I've been like, can we just get to the point where I've learned my lesson?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to get to that point. But
Right. The other thing with that too, and you just prompted this thought, is that I always think of, if I get stressed about a situation or something that's going on, I always think like, is this real? Right. And the real things, and I try to share this with my kids who are two of them are in college and they're going through finals this week and there's a lot of stress in their system. But I think about like, okay, you're going to get through this. This isn't
Mhm.
like real in the sense of life changing. We talk
Yes.
about our health, we talk about our wellness, we talk about our relationships that are so important to who we are and kind of how we show up. And it's really about perspective is
Yes.
just so important too. And so it's just really kind of questioning, I love it. It was one of our employees is like, hey, this is PR, not ER.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I know that
Uh-huh.
that's like kind of industry wide, but it's okay. Take a breath and we're going to work through it. And, we can come to some conclusions and work together to fix
It's
things. So
really important to be reminded of that.
right?
And it's really important to have people around you to remind you of that.
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
all get caught up in our own, what we feel is ER, but it really is not.
Right,
At all.
right, right. And in
Yes.
the COVID world, it's so important to think about how do we embrace self-care and wellness and, being able to identify when people need to take a step out
Yeah.
of that world for a little bit to just get themselves to a healthier place. It's just so
Yes.
important too.
Completely. And I agree with everything you said. And I was curious, is there anything that you do personally that helps you get through times of struggle or times of feeling helpless?
Yeah, it's so interesting because this kind of happened. There was a situation a couple of weeks ago that felt like it brought me stress. And the first thing I do, and I'm not always sure that this is positive, but I kind of like withdraw,
Uh-huh.
right? And I need to kind
Hmm.
of take a stock in like what's going on and why do I feel this way. I
That's
don't actually get
necessary.
stressed super often, and so kind of becomes alarming. So it's really kind of assess, and then it's thinking about, okay, where do we go from here, and really
Hmm.
kind of level set. Is this real? Is this
Hmm.
something that we can make choices and changes on, and then create an action plan from that?
Yeah.
So, and then I actually do shepherd. I really like, my husband will say to a fault, I really do like to ask. I find people who I feel like can give me really good advice or just even talk through a problem. And I
Hmm.
am definitely, I like to just really have those conversations around different perspectives before kind of taking action on
Yeah.
things.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned the Blue Zone. I'm curious, is there any other book or talk or video that you've read, watched that had a really big impact on your life that you think would benefit other people as well?
Yeah, I just eat up any type of content, but I think right now, so there's an older book that I think kind of set the tone when I really started to embrace organizational development, and it's a book from like I think it's like right around the '90s. So it's really an old one, but Peter Senge was he kind of spearheaded an organizational development world, and he created this. He had this book called The Fifth Discipline, and it's so important now too because it's really about looking at systemic
Hmm.
thinking and how we're all part of a bigger system, right? And it kind of goes to being service minded, right? You're part of
Yeah.
this big system, but it talks about like shared visioning. The five disciplines are shared visioning,
Hmm.
team learning, personal mastery. How do I
Hmm.
show up in my best way? Mental models, which is really unconscious bias, is
Right.
like the modern
Hmm.
the modern term for mental models. It's like whatever our past experiences that are helping shape our conversations.
Yeah.
And then the system,
Underlying beliefs.
how do we all work? So I really feel like even some of the learnings from that back when I first graduated college really comes forward. So that kind of helped from a OD perspective.
What was the name of that again?
The fifth
The
discipline.
fifth discipline.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm
And
gonna
so it's so interesting that something that's so old from a time stamp is really kind of all those concepts are so important right now, right? How do we really create something that we're all a part of? But from a
yes.
personal standpoint, again, going in, I feel like there's two podcasters that I love. One's
Yeah.
Jay Shetty. He has a
Uh-huh. Oh,
podcast
I
called On Purpose.
love. Yes.
I love him. I just feel
Yes.
like he himself is just so kind. And when I
Yes.
talk about positive intent, every question he asks, like I speak a little too much sarcasm, I think, myself, but there's nothing to him. Like everything is just like he exudes goodness and
Yeah.
kindness and curiosity. Right. And
Yes.
I feel like he's such a good role model, but he also has amazing guests on to interview um, him. And then from health perspective, when I think about just being healthy,
Hmm.
my latest is Dr. Mark Hyman, who has a podcast called Pharmacy, FARM. And it really talks about how food is the medicine that we all need these days and
Hmm.
what are we putting in our body. So,
Interesting. Well, I'm going to check that out because, yes,
yeah,
I've
those are my
been
two modern day ones.
educating myself, but I love Jay Shetty. I second that. He's
Yeah,
amazing.
and so
Yeah.
I heard about Mark Hyman because Jay Shetty interviewed him. So
Oh,
those
perfect.
are
See?
that's a connection. Yeah.
I love that. This has been wonderful. Now, Carolyn, if people are interested to learn more about Racepoint because they've been hearing you talk about it, is there a good way for them to get in touch with you? Check you on LinkedIn, or is there another way you prefer?
Yeah, absolutely. Connect
Okay,
with me, reach out on LinkedIn. I love to, again, connect with people and make that one on one and
great.
really talk about our community environment. That's great. Yeah.
Mm,
And then you can find me on our website and our blogs as
yes.
well.
And I'll add the links to the show notes as well. But
Great.
but before we go, I want to ask you my last question, just because I like to know what the answer is. What are you sure of in life?
Wow. What am I sure of in life? It all comes back to relationships, but it starts with me. So I've learned to trust myself. So I'm sure of myself and my perspective on things and my belief that we are here for a reason, whatever that is. And then I'm sure of the people in my life that are my go-tos and those relationships that I've built and that are so important to me.
Love it. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I appreciate it, Carolyn.
Yeah, I love connecting with you.
All right. I so enjoyed talking with Carolyn. I love the way she found her calling. She was in a technology program, but found herself intrigued by what the consultants were doing around organizational development. She acted on that curiosity and she started asking questions, learning as much as she could about what they did, what their goals were, their results, and soon she realized this was her true calling. And she was able to get herself switched over to that HR group. And I love that Carolyn followed that curiosity. And because she did, she found a career that she is passionate about. Too often we ignore our curiosity. For many, they have actually been taught to squash their curiosity from a young age. Most of us can remember being told at some point how curiosity killed the cat, right? Which I have to say, I have always hated that saying. Curiosity killed the cat is a proverb used to warn of the dangers of unnecessary investigation or experimentation. But the origin of the line is actually care killed the cat. And care, back then, meant worry. Therefore, worry killed the cat. That's right, people. Take that in. Worry killed the cat. Let that be the lesson that you take away. But people in charge, they really prefer that everyone below them do not investigate nor experiment. So changing that line and perverting the meaning has served people in power for many, many years, I'm sure including parents. But now that you know the truth, I hope any nugget of belief about curiosity being bad that may have taken sprout in the subconscious because of this abomination will have now vanished. Let your curiosity bloom, and anything that sparks that light inside of you, you owe it to yourself to follow. What are you curious about that you haven't followed up with? What can you find out more about today? As they knew back in 1912 when they added the final line, curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. So go ahead and scratch that curious itch. Carolyn had great advice around career success. She suggests aligning yourself with the key people for you. Who do you admire? Who do you want to learn from? Life is all about learning and growing, and learning from the people who went before you, the people who have blazed the trail and figured it out. Allow yourself to bypass countless mistakes by simply opening yourself up to the lessons of others. We can choose to grow in life through pain or through insight. Learning from the lessons of others is a much easier and more pleasurable way to grow. Carolyn shared that the foundation of her success is staying focused on what works for her. This is so important. No career path is straightforward, and there is no one right way about living your life. What is key is that you are in touch with what is important to you, and that you create the life that works for your own needs. As Carolyn suggested, ask yourself, if you take fear out of the equation, what would you choose? if failure was not an option, what decision would you make in your life? In all aspects, with your work, with your relationships, your experiences, your goals and your desires. Find clarity in what you want. And when it comes to your work, find those companies that align with your values and purpose. I appreciated that Carolyn shared one of her regrets with us: not living in another country. I really felt her on this, as this is one of my personal regrets as well. And I like learning about people's regrets because I think it's important to look at them. Regrets are usually around something that sparked a light in us, something that ignited that curiosity. And I find that you can do two things with regrets. You can either allow them to wither you from the inside out, making you feel brittle and cold, or you can take those regrets and use them as motivation for making your life even more colorful and wonderful. I've taken my regret of not living abroad and turned it into a driving passion for travel and an absolute devotion to wonderful vacations. My family has been blessed with incredible travel experiences because I took the broken shards of that dream and turned them into diamonds on the soles of my shoes. That regret has left a sparkle throughout my life. What regrets do you have? Is there anything you can do to take that regret and turn it into a sparkle in your life? Carolyn shared how she made mistakes based on fear in a previous role. She worked in a toxic culture and she accepted the status quo as the norm. She knows now that this was a mistake and she has learned from it. Now she knows there is no place for toxicity in the workplace. She has learned what can happen when you have those better conversations, when you ask the hard questions. And she has turned this regret into a driver to create the healthiest, most fulfilling organizational culture possible. She is making that personal regret sparkle for so very many people. This is how we eliminate our regrets. We learn. Really quick PSA. There really is no room for toxicity in the workplace. If you are experiencing toxicity, it is time to stand up and make a change in your organization if you have that capability. If you find yourself in a position where you're unable to make a change, then it is time to find a new job. And now is the time. The jobs are out there. Take some of Carolyn's advice and go after the opportunities that align with your values and goals. Show up to the interview authentic, curious, and ready to learn. Ask those smart questions. Ask around the company, such as what are their core values? What are their goals over the next 5 years? Ask smart questions about the position, such as what kind of clients would I work on? What role would I play? What would you expect me to accomplish in the first 6 months to a year? Ask questions about the team and the hiring manager. How do we stay connected? Why do you choose to work here? Why do you stay? When you find that place that really connects with you, you will find yourself easily engaged and motivated to do your very best work, making it even easier for you to continuously move up the ranks. For hiring managers, building an accepting, authentic, flexible, and transparent culture is the best thing that you can do to help with your own success. Strong talent creates strong companies, and the best talent is demanding a positive culture. Finally, I'll leave you with one last thought from Carolyn: the importance of perspective. As they say in the office, this is PR, not ER. And this is an important sentiment to remember. We can so easily get caught up in the little trials that trip us up in life. The mix-up at work can feel like a downright emergency. But is it? I love Carolyn's suggestion. When you are feeling stressed, ask yourself, is this real? Is this an ER moment? Or do I simply need to take some deep breaths, figure out what is going on, and make a plan from there? It is a choice. And just like the other morning for me, as a very minor example, but I thought about this conversation with Carolyn. This was after I was frantically trying to find my keys while being desperately late and feeling like it was horrible that I was desperately late. I could not be so late like this, and I could not find them anywhere, and I'm getting incredibly frustrated. So I began running through the house, throwing things right and left, eventually cursing and panicking more and more as every second ticks by. When I thought of this conversation, I finally just stopped. I took a moment. This is not really an emergency. So what if you're late? Took a deep breath. Calmed my thoughts. Finally thought a little more logically about the situation. And guess what? Found my keys just moments later. Imagine that. Again, minor example, but sometimes these minor moments can teach us about those bigger moments. So this is my wish for us all, that when you are feeling frazzled or stressed and you find yourself simply reacting to the volatile emotions, you will make the choice to stop, to breathe, to settle yourself, and then move forward from that calm and centered space. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Fresh Blood. Please subscribe and follow us on all streaming services, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Player FM. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Fresh Blood Podcast. I would love your help in spreading these stories and important messages. Please give us a like and share with a friend. Your help is greatly appreciated. I hope you make today a most fulfilling day.